Alright, so it's a late night at Ardent Studios in Memphis. Late enough that none of the session musicians are there, but the usual main gang is getting ready to record. John Fry's getting everyone mic'd up. Jim Dickinson's at that big board thing with all the buttons and switches. Lessa Aldridge is in the booth watching. Alex Chilton is in the recording space injecting a vial of Demerol straight into his mouth right before singing a song about Jesus' birthday. And Jody Stevens is... Wait, what in God's name? This album is weird, no matter which of the 7 different versions of it you're talking about. They're all weird in a very specific way that I don't think anything else I've heard quite fits into. Like, it's not eccentric and silly, but in a clearly self-aware, tongue-in-cheek way. It's not moody and disturbing, but in a way that's completely grounded in realism. It has pieces of all that, but is tougher to pin down the exact balance. And instead, it feels like an album that started on solid footing, but is in the middle of heading off the deep end and doesn't even realize it. Almost every song here is just a little off. They're paintings that keep hanging crooked no matter what you do. I'll take one song from it as an example, Kiss-A-Me. In some aspects, it's a straightforward, bouncy, energetic guitar and piano-driven rock track. But from the very first time I heard it, there was always some unsettling layer to it seeping through. And that firstly comes from Alex's vocals, which have the edges dulled out as if he's tipsy and slurring his words ever so slightly, just enough for you to be questioning if something's wrong with him.
Dreams and wishes like shooting stars coming on rush.
And alongside that, there's his main guitar riff, which is practically how you'd imagine it'd sound if all the strings on a guitar came undone at once. Helps that the general instrumental group there feels very disorganized throughout, only barely being held together by the stable drum beat. And lastly, there's the lyrics, which are at least pretty simple. He's referring to Lessa, his girlfriend at the time, saying kiss-a-me, kiss me, and in the chorus, well, you'd certainly assume he's talking about sex. But the thing is, I think if you played this song to a woman, she would run away. It's one of the least sexy songs I've ever heard in my life. It's not Marvin Gaye. It's not the Afghan Whigs Something Hot. It's a scary, strung-out drunk guy stumbling around asking, hey, do you want to go back to my place for a bit? Not exactly an enticing offer. So I then wonder, do these guys know that? Do they know it's not Marvin Gaye? I mean, surely, right? But even if so, then why? Why do this? Big Star truly was not always this odd. There was a time when the weirdest thing about them was the fact that they were 4 white guys whose debut album was going to be distributed by Stax Records. You know, Stax Records. Otherwise, they were one of countless rock bands in the early 70s who were hoping to carry the torch of those other guys. The Beatles. The one piece that made them stand out in that respect was that they might actually be good enough to do it. And they were, but they didn't. Big Star, formerly known as Rock City, which is formerly known as Ice Water, which formerly didn't exist, initially consisted of singer and guitarist Chris Bell, bassist Andy Hummel, and drummer Jody Stevens. A key ingredient added on top of that was then another singer and guitarist in Alex Chilton. Him and Chris soon had a songwriting partnership so close that they wanted any song that either of them touched to be credited as Bell Chilton, the same way Lennon-McCartney worked. And to use that comparison to easily define this dynamic quick, I'd say that, within this band, Chris is the John here. He more often uses a harder edge both instrumentally and vocally, like with the song Feel. And he also has a bit more potential to be esoteric and layered in his writing, while Alex, more like Paul, has a gentler touch on this record and is a tad stronger melodically. Like the Ballad of El Goodo is so Paul.
It gets so hard in times like now to hold gone.
It's just a winning combination if you're ever lucky enough to find it, you know? So Big Star's first record is filled with that pair trading off lead vocals song to song, with one Andy Hummel track slotted in the middle like a George. And that collection of songs is excellent. It's such a smooth, bright record with this silky guitar tone that I'd never get tired of, and some of the most comforting backing vocals and harmonies I've heard on any album. Especially Chris's. On an album where the production is so lush and clean, his voice just has that right amount of nasaliness to add that tiny bit of texture to the album. Like, I don't know what it is, I love it. It's probably clearest on In the Street. You've got happy rockers like that, or When My Baby's Beside Me, which managed to fit into that category where they're great to listen to, obviously, but also just feel like it was a blast to put together and record. And the other tracks, the acoustic ones, are so kind and gorgeous. Like 13 is so stripped down and simple to match the adolescent theme of its lyrics. But I remember the first time I heard it, I had to stop what I was doing until it finished, and then listen to it again, and so on. It's those damn harmonies. I could go on about number one record. I like it a lot. And as a full record, I'd say it did succeed at feeling like another branching off point from that other band, The Beaches. Like the production and overall sound of the record, which the entire band, and especially Chris, labored over constantly to a perfectionist extent, has this lush sheen that feels natural and effortless even though that's far from the case. It leans towards the Abbey Road level of sonic smoothness, while the songs themselves are perhaps closer to Rubber Soul territory. Varied styles, nice harmonies, ordered in a very particular way, but relatively small-scale pop structures. There aren't any huge, bold experiments here, like the Abbey Road medley, which is actually maybe the first way in which Big Star was kinda out of step with general popular rock music. Like, even though it's only 2 years removed from Let It Be, in the early 70s, everything was expanding. A lot of the hit albums were larger in sound, scale, and character. Big Star, meanwhile, for a rock band, seems pretty humble. There's nothing larger than life here. It's not Ziggy Stardust, it's not Who's Next. They're just singing about watching the sunrise, smoking a joint, and taking you to the dance. Not necessarily in that order. So I do wonder if perhaps Big Star was never going to be huge in this era. Moderate success might have been their ceiling. But if you weren't aware already, they barely even left the floor, because
So Big Star, number one record is the name of the album.
Yeah.
It's on Ardent and should be in the stores. Should be in the stores. Should be in the stores. Should be in the stores.
It was Stax's fault. Unambiguously Stax's fault. They wanted to expand to new white markets by partnering with a studio like Ardent, but flat out did not have distribution set up for anything outside their norm. The Ardent albums just weren't getting into stores. So even when number one record is released and gets glowing reviews and gets radio play and the band is doing radio interviews and promotion, it's all for naught when barely anybody is able to actually go out and buy the album. The problem really was as simple as that.
We sold maybe 4,000 records, maybe. But at that time, you had to sell 100,000 to even get noticed.
So that sucks. Because if the band and album names didn't give it away, these guys had high expectations for themselves, and absolutely none of it came to fruition. Now they're in a spot where the group's demoralized, tensions flare up, Chris Bell leaves the band so the main songwriting duo is split in half, Andy Hummel's barely hanging on himself, and they're making no money. So what's next? Well, this was all messed up just through bad circumstances. The album was great, they just got unlucky. Stax is setting up a new distribution deal with Columbia and their very, very, very trustworthy president, Clive Davis. So we'll just make another album, and things should turn out differently. Why not? Big Star continues as a three-piece and releases the follow-up record, Radio City. And it's somehow just as good as the first record. Like, 2 of the tracks had been worked on before Chris left the group, so his songwriting voice is still tucked away in there, but Alex, Andy, and Jody managed to fill in the void he left really well. Even in the production aspect, where Chris's clean perfectionism is gone, Radio City actively leans in a slightly more raw, garage band, but still vibrant sort of feel. A song like Oh My Soul wouldn't have been as good on number 1 record. Here it's like rock and roll distilled down to its purest form. That early garage guitar tone and simple lyrics, but with the punch and energy of a 70s rock jam, especially with how much Jody's moving around the drum set, it's just a perfect song. And there's similar ingredients in other tracks, like the harmonica-ridden Life is White, or Maud Lang has a straight old bluesy riff that's beefed up by the surrounding instrumental flourishes. Plus Alex's vocal is having a bit of a growl as he compares himself to a dog.
All night long, I was howling. I was a barking dog.
I legitimately go back and forth between which of these I prefer constantly. Radio City is, again, excellent. Now let's go see how successful it presumably was. It wasn't very successful at all. Yeah, different reasons, but same result. Critics loved Radio City, but it's hard for anyone to buy a copy when they're all sitting in a warehouse. There was again practically no good distribution. A lot of people would have to call Ardent directly to have a copy sent to them. Another objective failure. And with that, Andy Hummel left the band to finish college, and Jody and Alex, now instead of having no albums and 2 money, they have 2 albums and no money. That's the scraps of a situation that the album we first brought up was picking up from. And it meant that if there were to be a third Big Star album, it would be made with the knowledge that selling a lot of copies isn't even really an option on the table. Whether they work with Stax or not, any momentum they had is gone, and the whole experience has been demoralizing. I mean, there was at least 1 show on the Radio City tour that they had to cancel due to low ticket sales. And at this point, the band isn't even really a band. It's just 2 guys. So there's nothing to lose. Still being buds with the crew at Ardent, they can just work on any songs there. You don't have to think about how any audience will view your work because they already don't care. Your ambition can run completely free. You can break new barriers, play whatever you want, things you never thought were even possible to achieve. Something like...
Naked on a side love, oh, cool down.
Yeah, there's no slow, smooth transition into this record. It's just here. In only 2 years, they go from an album that's half filled with beautiful acoustic ballads that are romantic and almost sappy in a way, to then making stuff that's, well, you know. This album is disorderly. It's initially quite off-putting and consistently confusing, starting right from its origin, where they weren't even sure while recording if it was going to be a Big Star album or an Alex solo album or something new entirely, all the way to its eventual release, which didn't first happen until 4 years after recording had finished and resulted in, as I said before, 7 versions of it being released, all of which have a unique track order. There's not a real definitive order for these songs. There's not even an official album title. Is it Sister Lovers, or is it Third? Or is it Big Star's Third? Or is it Sister Lovers: the third album? Or the third album / Sister Lovers? This is beyond parody. How many albums can you say are like that? The main consistency you could argue is present is the album's emotional aesthetic, which is this cold, slightly deteriorated, haunting mood. It's present in the rock tracks through this bold, stumbly delivery that leaves you feeling uneasy. And with the slower tracks, they basically have a glass build. Surprisingly beautiful, but dangerously fragile. A vase on the corner of the table. Like, there's a particular spot that sums it up in the song Big Black Car, where the instruments all take a moment to breathe while Alex sings the line,
Nothing can hurt me.
And everything in that song besides that lyric is basically screaming that that's a fucking lie. It's a uniquely effective dour tone that Big Star hadn't even sniffed on their prior albums. The apparent disconnect there is a major reason why I'm so drawn to Sister Lovers. Like, if this were Big Star's first album, it would still be interesting, and it would still be good. Like, don't get it twisted, I'm not only talking about it because it's weird. This is a flat-out great record. It's just that the place it holds in the impressively rapid deterioration of this band was the largest force keeping it in the back of my brain, constantly wondering, how did they get here? What are the direct influences that make up the tapestry of this album as opposed to their others? What was wrong with these guys? And now, after committing to finding those answers, having done a lot of focused listening and a lot of research, I can say, I'm still not that certain. Like, obviously there's less overall resources available on this. Big Star weren't getting as many interviews or reviews or think pieces as the bands of that time who were actually popular. And even as time goes on and their cult following solidifies more, and Jody and Alex reunite to play shows in the 90s and 2000s, Alex was rarely willing to speak about Big Star in any sense, not even just this record.
Which group is by your side again? How does it feel? Does it bring back the same emotions back in the 70s era?
I don't know. I don't have anything to say.
He'd play some of their songs live, but usually seemed interested in moving on to other stuff. He wouldn't offer much perspective on this. So from the sources there are, I'm not certain about any of the influences on this album, but I do have some ideas. I'm going to divide what makes up the album into two categories: passive influences and active influences. The passive ones are basically just the environment that surrounded the musicians at the time, which then made certain characteristics naturally bleed into the sound of the album. And then the active influences are the direct choices that Alex or Jody or the producers made in trying to guide the songs towards whatever vision they had of what the album should sound like. So with that category, I'd like to more seriously go back to the idea of not needing to worry about attracting an audience. Big Star always had a decent amount of freedom at Ardent Studios. They didn't have executives breathing down their neck every day, but they themselves did want to have success as a band, and made some decisions in service of that. Their songs had hooks, they were vibrant, they were accessible. But now it's a more extreme case where it wasn't even certain these songs would culminate in a full album. It's just the result of Alex being given keys to the studio. So they're not only not aiming for radio play, in some cases they're actively avoiding it. An interesting note on how committed Alex was to not having a commercial sound here is that the song Downs didn't initially have this disorganized, vaudevillian, playing a song using only junk from the shed sort of vibe, one that no major record label would ever sign off on. On the complete third collection, there's a demo of the song that's just Alex with the well-composed, kind of bluesy guitar riff.
But as for you, throwdowns.
Relatively normal sounding track, and as the story goes, everyone was in the studio listening to a recording that was more in that direction, and John Fry said out loud that he thought it had some hit potential. And Alex took that personally. So next thing you know, he's saying, let's replace a snare drum with a basketball. And from there, he kept adding piece after piece to make the song even more wobbly, as Jim Dickinson put it. Almost every song here has a very obvious quirk, twist, unique angle. From the sloppiness in Downs, to the creep factor of Kiss-A-Me, to Jesus Christ, an already out-of-place Christmas song that's presumably also being done ironically given Alex wasn't religious at all. To even something as simple as their cover of Femme Fatale, originally sung by Nico, having gender-swapped vocals with Alex singing lead and his girlfriend Lessa only doing these mumbly backing vocals. It's hard to find anything fully straightforward and conventional. The closest you'll get is the track For You, which is sometimes titled Sometimes Instead, like, you see what I mean? But the track itself is a mid-tempo, relatively straightforward, string-heavy love song that probably still holds more of the group's influence from the Bug Boys. It's a nice song, nothing's off here. It's just pleasant and melodic and actually really sweet, and oh okay, it was the only song written and sung by Jody Stevens, so I sure wonder who it was that brought in more of these disturbing ingredients. There's a level of contrarian behavior in Alex that's enabled by his freedom within Ardent Studios, and that would explain the eclectic collection of comparably less accessible sounds, but I can't think that Alex himself was merely throwing stuff at the wall the entire time. Maybe the basketball thing was, but in general, surely anything Alex did still had some sort of connection to his own taste. The songs couldn't be commercial, but he surely still wanted to like his own songs, right? So to get a better angle of Alex's specific taste and where the third album might have been heading, I dug into more of his career after Big Star ended, which honestly isn't filled with nearly as many albums as you'd expect him to release across 3.5 decades. He was pretty off and on with music, at many points working odd jobs instead, as a cab driver, custodian, dishwasher, tree trimmer. He's an interesting one. But anyways, from the music he did release then, it's firstly so clear that he loves the era that was the dawn of rock. Throughout his whole solo career, his album releases and live set lists are usually around half covers of old songs rather than entirely original compositions. Stuff like Summertime Blues, Lipstick Traces, I've Had It. They're present all the way from Like Flies on Sherbert to Loose Shoes and Tight, I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. And a lot of these are probably songs from his childhood. It makes sense that he'd have a soft spot for them. But what got me thinking about this potentially being connected to something as strange as Sister Lovers is that Alex rarely played them in the straight-laced way that they were all originally recorded as. He takes these clean-cut songs that were played by dudes in nice suits at the school dance, and he smudges them. He smears them. Basically, he makes them uglier. Honestly, the two best examples to show how directly this was Alex's aim are both from Like Flies on Sherbert. One is his cover of the 70s funk track Boogie Shoes by Casey and the Sunshine Band.
I wanna do until the sun comes up. Oh, yeah.
Because he took that song and first changed up the instrumental tone so that it sounds like a song written 15 years before it actually was. The tinny piano, thin, high-pitched guitar, the whole band makeup is exactly that early light rock sound. But then the way it's performed is so loose, so messy, as if he's drunk again.
I wanna do until I can't get up.
And then the other is an original song, the title track, which starts on a similar level, but comes undone to an extreme, with his vocals becoming manic and screeching more and more as it goes. The only explanation I saw on Alex's fascination with that sound came from a time when he lived in New York City during the late 70s, early 80s, and he was really enamored by the growth of the punk scene there. Seeing the Ramones or Richard Hell, he found it reminiscent of the chaos and looseness of early rockabilly. Next to the contemporaries of each era, rockabilly and punk are comparatively not smoothed out, cleaned up, refined. It just feels like straight up, energetic, no frills, incredibly imperfect, pure rock and roll. Taking a few of the same ingredients and going more extreme with them. That's perhaps what Alex wanted to do. It's just that for punk, it usually leans towards going more extreme via speed and anger and loudness, while Alex accomplished that by building up the sloppiness and chaos within the simple song structures, whether in his solo work or his time playing what they called rockabilly with Panther Burns.
That may be the worst sound I've ever heard come out on television. The loveliest pictures.
Thank you very much.
And in those works of his, Sister Lovers has just as much overlap there as it has with Number One Record or Radio City. So the lens I'm basically viewing the album through is as his initial attempts to make something new from the rockabilly influence. And the reason it isn't immediately apparent, outside of one cover of Whole Lotta Shakin' going on, is because all he was taking at this point was the looser tone, the openly imperfect style. He's not yet trying to write 50s style doo-wop songs and turn them ugly. He's just taking Big Star songs and turning them ugly. So that's how he ends up with a lot of the acoustic tracks being played extra sleepy. Dream Lover, Kangaroo, and Take Care especially, is one that sounds like it's getting slower as it goes, even if in reality it's consistent. And with the other songs, it's either via Alex being dirtier as a frontman, what with slurring his words and flat out having suggestive lyrics in Kiss Me or Oh Dana, or through the instrumentals being messy and chaotic, but not quite that forceful. Nothing they do here is as focused as the twisted 50s style Alex does later, and it's never as energetic and punchy as punk music. The closest he gets there is You Can't Have Me, which, by the way, great drum track there. Jody Stevens is a super underrated drummer. He's usually pretty Ringo, which is good, but he can do a lot more when he wants to. But anyways, the point is that Sister Lovers largely ends up occupying its own space alone. It's difficult to find a well-defined category that it fits into. It's not far enough in that 50s style, it's not punk, it's too odd to fit in with the power pop sound of their prior records, but at the same time, it's more grounded than other famously chaotic and exaggerated artists like Frank Zappa or Captain Beefheart. If I really had to attach its sonic palette to any one scene, it would actually be what punk was a progenitor for, the 80s underground and early indie scene. This still makes sense, right? Big Star's first two records already have a well-established power pop connection there, with REM or The Replacements, who flat out wrote a song about Alex Chilton called Alex Chilton. The 80s indie music is a big umbrella, and Sister Lovers connects to a completely different area of it. Like, I don't hear much Replacements, but I do hear a ton of Galaxy 500. Take the song Kangaroo and compare it to something like Galaxy 500's Tell Me. They both have that gentle, wavy guitar at the center, the ethereal, dreamy soundscape, with Kangaroos getting purposefully muddled and interrupted by these harsher additions like guitar feedback, or sporadic drum fills, or a cowbell, I'm pretty sure. Over time, it's probably become my favorite track on the record. Each listen feels different. And that's owed not just to Alex, but specifically to his partnership with Jim Dickinson.
So he plays me like a kangaroo, which is, it's just 12-string, acoustic 12-string, and vocal. I said, yeah, Alex, that's what do you hear on that? And he says, he gets again with the evil grin, he says, well, why don't you produce it, Mr. Producer?
Something like that and Galaxy 500 both offer so much breathing room. Sister Lovers might have a bit of slowcore in it. There's a lot of lax nature to the performances, an unpolished eccentric personality, with the production also being rough enough that it resembles some aspects of the 80s DIY sounds despite these actually being recorded professionally. And I can easily imagine a universe where Alex's work with Jim and Arden moves more strongly in that direction and becomes a clearer early step of alternative rock in bands like Galaxy 500, Pixies, and Beat Happening. Perhaps in a world where he has actual stability and consistency through which he could have been more prolific and released more. Because during these recordings, there wasn't much of that. On the passive influences here, the environment the album was made in is much more present in the songs than you'd usually hear. I've already described a lot of the vocals being slurred, so it's not crazy to learn that one factor going into all this was increasing amounts of drugs and alcohol. I mean, Alex was a singer-songwriter in the 70s, you know the archetype, I don't need to go far into it. But there's a reason the songs don't sound healthy, you know? And in general, this period at Ardent Studios is frankly pretty depressing. Everything was deteriorating. The band, romantic relationships, the studio's prospects as a business. And one thing I haven't touched on yet is that Alex himself actually experienced legitimate large-scale success with the band he was in prior to Big Star. So his downfall has been a much more prolonged process than what Big Star alone experienced in never getting off the ground. When Alex was only a teenager, he was in a band called the Box Tops, and on their first album, with their first single, recorded the very first time that Alex set foot in a studio, they had a hit song called The Letter, largely off the back of Alex using his voice in such a low, soulful way that people would often be surprised to learn that it came out of a scrawny white kid.
Lonely days ago, I was going home. My baby just wrote me a letter.
Huge song. Got to #1 on the charts, named Song of the Year by Time. You know, it was bigger than your average hit song that only has a month-long lifespan. And while the Box Tops' popularity slowly degraded from there, with Alex as the only consistent member given they weren't writing a majority of their own songs, they did still have a decent amount of other charting hits throughout those years while also touring the US constantly. they were more than a one-hit wonder. So Alex basically started his professional music career at a higher point than most could dream of ever getting to. He knew what it was like to make it, so to speak. And when he quit the box tops, he wanted to do it again, but on his own terms. With his own songs, his own album, solo, not with a band, an earnest artistic statement. He was in the midst of that, having recorded and now being in the process of shopping around these songs that would be released decades later under the name Free Again. They would have been released earlier, but then Alex got into contact with Chris Bell, and you know where they went from there. He had the luckiest start and the unluckiest every year after. Knowing Alex's backstory leading up to the band is interesting because it's clear that joining Big Star and sticking with Big Star was not the optimal move in a lot of ways. Had Alex just become a solo artist at that point, people knew that name. They knew the singer of the box tops. There's a clear as day angle to successfully market a potential album from. Alex Chilton in big letters. People knew that guy. They didn't know Big Star. Going with them was the greater risk, and yet he went that route anyways. Presumably because he truly believed in the group and every single overly optimistic dream they had of being the next Boo Boos. I mean, once again, why do you think those albums were titled #1 record in Radio City? There's a bit of tongue-in-cheek there, but jokes tend to stem from some level of truth and sincerity. They thought they were great, and that everyone else would eventually see it too. And as such, I'd have to imagine that the failure of that was especially heartbreaking for Alex, who lost the most momentum in attempting this. I mean, his choice to rarely speak about that era of Big Star, and specifically his relationship with Chris, kinda gives off the vibe of trying to be like, I don't care. It's not as if I was like, both emotionally and financially invested in this band or anything. It's not even worth talking about, yeah. Like, he's still enigmatic, I can't psychoanalyze him, but there's no doubt that it hurts to see that dream crumble down to just these two guys. Which, by the way, even the fact that it ended up being these two guys remaining is bizarre. From the outside, I always assumed that Alex and Jody must have been real close buds who stuck together through these tough times and remained friends long after the band broke up. But let me tell you, I read this whole biography of Alex Chilton, and throughout the entire book, there is not one single line referencing any level of closeness between Alex and Jody. In the early points of the band, there's plenty talk of Alex's partnership with Chris. Obviously, they were tight wanting to do the Lennon-McCartney thing. And then in the Radio City era, there's plenty to show that Alex and Andy were friendly and would spend their spare time hanging out, with Alex also consistently encouraging Andy's songwriting efforts. Then, even in this brief period where they were touring after Andy left, they had a new bassist named John Lightman for that tour. And it's clear that him and Alex were buddies until Alex got too crazy for him to stay with the group. Nothing whatsoever on the Alex-Jody dynamic being a particularly positive one. The fact that they remained as the duo seems like more or less happenstance from what I could tell. At best, maybe it was like a Mythbusters thing where they connect more professionally than personally. The point is that he's seeing his band literally fall apart with each album they release. A band that he truly believed would reach greatness, that he ditched a more optimal path as a solo artist to do, all while he's running out of the money he made when he was a teenager in the box tops. His on-again, off-again relationship with Lessa, who was often an active collaborator on the album, is extremely volatile. He's doing too many drugs. He's finally out of the terrible contract with Stax, but now has no other record deal set up. The studio he records at is running out of their own money too, and maybe that's the type of negative environment that leads to you recording a song called Holocaust. It's no coincidence that sonically these tracks all have a very doomer tone, whether in the sinister characters occupying the songs, the pessimistic lyrics, or the mellow, echoey, empty style of production. That's all from real life bleeding into the album, removing any level of vibrancy that used to be there. You weren't going to get stuff like Dream Lover or Big Black Car on Radio City. Even a song whose initial layer seems actively upbeat is in reality just as dour. One of the pillars of the album is Thank You Friends, which musically is certainly more alive and energetic than all the others, It's a solid pop rock track with a nice hook that has everything pushed upward by this gospel choir. And lyrically, it's seemingly based around Alex's gratitude for his life as a musician thus far, thanking his friends for all they've done. Seems nice, right? But for me, there's always been one specific wording in the song that makes it seem more tongue-in-cheek.
All the ladies and gentlemen who made this song so probable.
The use of the word probable here is unusual. Generally in that context we would use the word possible instead, which on paper isn't any different, but for whatever reason we tend to use it in a more binary way. It happened or it didn't. If something was made possible, then we're saying that to mean that it happened. But the word probable we think of more with, probabilities, statistics, the likelihood, but not guarantee, of a particular thing happening. So Alex choosing that word instead implies a bit of bitterness on his end. Like he was probably told time and time again that Big Star is going to be huge, they're going to have a hit, the album's going to sell. But then they didn't, and that assessment was then corrected to say that Big Star had very good odds of success, but luck didn't pan out for them. Now on the other end of that, Alex is sarcastically saying, yeah, thanks a lot for all the work that left us no better than when we started. There's not much, if any, uncomplicated joy here. The depression and strange crookedness is the much more dominant tone. It's always what struck me more, and frankly what made me, for a long time, revisit the album much less often than the first two. It's quite unwelcoming, and nowhere is that more the case than when the mood sinks to its absolute lowest point with that track, Holocaust. It's legitimately one of the bleakest songs I've ever heard in my life. It's just Alex and a piano with the background having, I don't even know what instruments exactly, but like a very ghost-like whistling sound. It's like they're playing with all the lights off in a room that's old and rickety, with Alex just close enough to the mic that his vocal levels kinda peak at the end, making it seem strained. And of course, lyrically, it's haunting. Your mother's dead, you're on your own, everybody goes, leaving those who fall behind. It just gets darker and darker, culminating in the line, you're a wasted face.
You're a sad-eyed lie. You're a holocaust.
Which, when I first heard that, I was like, my God, that's gotta be the most terrible thing you can actually call a person. It's horrific. What was so awful that could have possibly inspired a song like that? It's unimaginable, just something so horrible. Don't look it up, it won't live up to your expectations. It's such a cold, dead song. Like sometimes I'm almost scared to listen to it. That's something that you can't make fit on just any record. And the fact that it's the centerpiece here, that it's seemingly the most popular song in this group, says way more about this third album than anything else I've tried to describe. It just doesn't seem healthy a lot of the time. It doesn't seem well. And that was evident during recording too, given that Alex's volatility in the studio reached a boiling point of worry that caused John Fry to completely pull the plug on any more recordings being done for it. Like Brian Wilson's Smile, except it's Alex Chilton's, Frown. There's some level of a lost album in there, which only adds to the themes present in the individual songs. The dark mystique, the slight deterioration, the sloppy nature. They're present all the way down to the actual recordings getting cut short and the reaction to test pressings being shopped around to other labels ranging from, "Baby, that is very disturbing," to, "I don't have to listen to that again, do I?" That all made it so that further steps were never taken, and none of the versions that eventually got released are even really complete. They're a bit cobbled together Frankenstein style, except nobody can decide what's the head and what's the torso and what's the big toe, and should we even include the left foot? Like sometimes Downs is on side 1, sometimes it's side 2, sometimes it's only a bonus track, sometimes it isn't there at all. Like, it's a mess, still to this day. So how Sister Lovers came to be, or third, or whatever, The main ingredient is very obviously the destruction of the optimism surrounding the band. Everything is falling apart, and the album reflects that. You wouldn't be hearing something like this coming from a band that's selling out every show in their cross-country tours because everything's just peachy for them. And of the bands who have made albums in their own dire circumstances, the wounds of that stand out so much more in Big Star because its disturbing layers are placed on top of these guys whose instinct is to make music that's just prettier. Don't forget that Alex was a teen idol. In modern times, the most popular song he's written was a sensitive acoustic ballad about earnest adolescent romance. And the very first song he sings on a Big Star album is completely flooded with light and optimism. And I don't think that this kinder spirit is completely absent from this third album. It's just been beaten down so much by stress, chaos, depression, poor choices, and bad luck in that band that was after their time initially and became something that was ahead of their time, never quite being what they needed to be. The songs have all this muck, all this cynicism, and flat-out worrying behavior. But within that off-putting sonic environment, there's a bit of what once was. And that's what keeps the album actually sounding stranger and more fascinating than if it were 100% consumed by its negative circumstances. Instead, it's like maybe 80% consumed, I don't know. Which is more confusing, because it's this conflicted amalgamation that's so unique in that while absolutely everything around them is falling apart, and they're beaten and bloodied, you have that environment naturally bleeding in, and Alex himself actively leans into it at many points as he searches for a new sound. Like, if I had to give a verdict on Kiss of Me, I'd guess that, yeah, it is supposed to sound creepy. Even the title being spelled that way could be a recognition of his slurring vocals and how weird they are. However, mixed in between stuff like that, his vaudevillian use of a basketball, and all the layers of muck and grime smeared across the album, he still has that bit of Paul in him. Whether Alex wants to or not, he naturally writes pretty songs. Legitimately beautiful stuff like Dream Lover and Take Care. He includes a lot of smooth string melodies in the instrumentals, apparently because he first heard the strings in Jody's song For You, and they were so good that Alex immediately wanted them in his songs too. And he has an impressive, kind voice that loves to harmonize and occasionally brings in a very boyish playfulness to the otherwise jaded recordings. It feels like it should all be gone, and it kinda wants to be gone, and soon it will be gone. But in this specific moment, in the middle of this complete mess, there's still that bit of life. The last bits of that intrinsic part of the band that truly believed their first album would top the charts, and had that earnest, youthful, optimistic desire to carry the torch of those other guys. You know, the Bathtubs.
It sounds a bit like goodbye. In a way, it is, I guess, as I leave your side.